Hello, welcome Ian to another episode of Get Real, an Own Person podcast. I'm Megan Moraes Garzon, and I'm so excited to have you here. Feel free to introduce yourself. For anyone listening, Ian used to be my boss, but he's now, I consider, a friend and still a mentor. So welcome to the pod, Ian.
Thank you, Megan. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. And today we're going to be speaking about something I think is very important and interesting, kind of your personal journey, personal, but your career journey as well. And the topic is really what I'm calling the long game, letting your values guide your next chapter, which we've spoken about. And I was, of course, familiar with your career, but why you kind of made a recent shift. So do you want to just give us a high level of what that entails?
Sure. So just for the audience's sake, I spent the bulk of my career in the technology industry doing communications and corporate marketing, and found myself at a bit of a career crossroads recently and decided to make the move to education. So now I lead strategy and communications for the San Mateo County Office of Education.
Yes. So quite different than the tech world, right? And I mean, similar, there's overlap in terms of what you're actually working on and your skill set, but how would you describe the biggest differences?
Well, things do work a little bit differently in government. There are definitely more processes, more hoops that you need to jump through to ensure things like fairness and equity. Um, it's a little bit of a different animal, but to your point, there are a lot of transferable skills. I mean, communications and marketing, those skills I think can be transferred to any industry.
Right. And so kind of curious, what drew you to that space originally and specifically B2B tech communications?
Yeah, so I actually started my career on the nonprofit side. When I graduated from UC Berkeley during a tough economy and couldn't find any jobs that related to my degree, which was political science, I fell back on some experience I had working with people with disabilities. And so I actually spent the first several years working at a home and training center for adults with developmental disabilities. And I really enjoyed that, but I realized I needed to make a bit more money if I was ever going to have a house and have a family here in the Bay Area. So I reached out to somebody who I knew whose wife worked at a PR agency, a tech PR agency, and she introduced me to another agency. And several interviews later, I got my first job working at a tech PR agency. And, I really enjoyed it. I was good at it, good communicator. I really loved learning about the different types of technologies. And after many years on the agency side, then I went
Sorry, do you want to just start that sentence again? Sorry about that.
So after many years on the agency side, I went in-house running corporate communications for McAfee and really enjoyed that working for several other companies after that.
Great. Yeah. I mean, you built a great career around that. And that's really, um, you know, it's kind of a lucky and great surprise that you ended up being so good at that and you found your fit within the tech realm because it seemed like you were doing rewarding work before that. And it was kind of like you were thinking about the logistics and survival mode, which everyone does, especially, in an area where you have to have a certain amount of money, honestly, to be able to afford it. So, at that time in your life when you first made that shift and realized you were getting the hang of it and getting good at it, what was going through your mind? Like, what was happening in your life at that time? I just kind of want to paint that picture a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it was largely a financial decision, but I also was fascinated by technology. My father had been a computer programmer, and I sort of grew up around technology. I read about it in my spare time. I really wanted to understand it better and be closer to it. And so, once I made the shift, um, I really enjoyed it for the most part. Now, there are always, jobs where you go like, am I in the right place? But what I find is those jobs are usually, you're asking yourself those types of questions because of the people you work with, particularly the person you work for.
Mm.
Um, but I've had the pleasure of working for some really great people in my career, and That's what I'd like to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true that the people you work with really make or break the experience. I've had that same experience myself. Um, and I'm wondering when you got into this tech career and you kind of moved from place to place and then you kind of got your groove, did you feel like you were shifting your identity in any way from when you originally started out? Or what was it a shift or was it kind of just a natural evolution for you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was shifting my identity. I think it was sort of tapping into a different part of my identity, which is,
Mm,
more of the, kind of, creative and also intellectual side. Um, it, what I'll say is that, making the change to a career in tech, although it was rewarding in many ways, I didn't find it completely fulfilling, which
mm,
is why I continue to do a lot of nonprofit work outside of work and why I eventually ran for office.
right. Can you talk a bit about your time in office?
Yeah, I'm hearing some static. Are you hearing that?
I actually am, but that actually happened last time I recorded for some reason, and Gabe can edit that out. I don't know if there's anything I can do right now. Let me see.
Okay. Do you want to do you want to repeat the question?
Um, yes. What did I say again?
Oh, I think you were asking me about when I first decided to run for office.
Oh, yes. Okay. So can you actually speak a bit to when you first ran for office? What was that like?
Yeah, when I first ran for office, I was 27 years old, and which is pretty young for a candidate. I
Yeah.
ran for city council and didn't win. There were about, I think, 13 candidates that year. I think I came in seventh or eighth, so sort of in the middle to the bottom of the pack. But I ran again 2 years later and came a lot closer. I actually lost by 129 votes. And
Mm.
so it was so close I could taste it.
Oh, man.
And then
Were
3
you
months
bummed?
3 months later, a council member resigned due to a conflict of interest, and the council ended up appointing me to the seat as the next highest vote getter. Excuse me. But then I had to run in a special election that fall, that same year, because the city attorney said that our charter said that you had to run in the very next election. So I ended up running and losing my seat. And that's when I took some time off, focused on my family
Mhm.
before I pulled myself up again and ran again 5 years later and won. Um,
Nice.
so, I like to tell that story, plus a little bit more, like when I'm talking to people about resilience and persistence, because um, I ran 3 times after that, and the very last time I ran, I was actually the top vote getter, and so
Nice.
I particularly love to tell that story to kids, and get them to think about the fact that life is going to knock you down, it's going to take you back a peg or take you down a peg, however you want to put it, and you just got to keep getting back up and keep trying and pursue what you think is right.
Yeah. So is the main reason why you kept running even after losing because you wanted to kind of do what was right? What inside you drove you to keep pursuing it and keep trying?
Yeah, so I'm always someone who has wanted to help people. I'll say that my parents instilled that value in me at a very young age, that no matter what we have, we need to give back. We need to give back and help people who are less fortunate, people who need our help. Um, Being part of a community is really important to me. And when I got my first job out of college, like I said, working with people with disabilities, what struck me about my community was that people really looked out for each other and they
Uh,
helped each other up when somebody stumbled or when they fell. And I had never experienced that personally. And I really wanted to be part of that. And so, I also felt like I've always had leadership skills that
mhm,
I wanted to apply to solving problems, to helping other people, and that running for office, I still believe is a noble cause.
mhm.
So I wanted to do that.
Well, that's awesome that you really did it and you kept going for it even when you didn't get it. Um, so I'm glad you served in office. Um, Going back to the feeling you mentioned that you didn't completely feel fulfilled when you, were in your comfortable tech career and you had, you know, um, leadership roles and the job was good and maybe the people were like we met, there was definitely enjoyment in terms of the people, but what how can you describe that lack of fulfillment? Is it because you weren't helping people as much as in roles like a mayor's role, or what was that? What was lacking?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of, like I said, rewarding work in tech. You as you said, you meet a lot of great people, you make friends. There's that enjoyment there. But at the end of the day, I thought, okay, how is what I'm doing helping people? It's
Hmm.
helping the company, it's increasing shareholder value, but is it helping the people who really need help? Um, it felt a little disconnected to me. It's like, yes, we may be what I may be doing may be helping the company's customers, but are those the people in the world who need my skills to help them? So I just felt like I always needed that something extra on the side, whether it was
Hmm.
running for office or serving on a nonprofit board. That's always been part of my life.
Yeah, and I've talked about this actually in other um, episodes of like there's a you can be passionate and care about something, but it doesn't always have to be your full career, right? So you were kind of doing that on the side, which is great. But now it's kind of ideal that you do feel that way in your current job. So can you just kind of walk us through, when towards the end of your last tech job, when we worked together, what happened, how you felt? Maybe you had some stress or fear when looking for a new role, and kind of walk us through how you ended up deciding that this was the right next step.
Yeah, so my last company, as you know, was acquired by private equity, and as often happens, the whole executive team was turned over, including the person who hired me at a couple different companies, who we both worked with, who was a
Mhm,
great guy, who has now gone on to become a CEO. But once that executive team was gone, then the relationships that we had built with executives weren't there anymore. And so you knew people came in, they had a different set of priorities. One of the priorities was to reduce the size of the marketing department. And so for the first time in my career, I found myself and many members of my team getting cut. Um, so that led to some, looking around and doing a lot of consulting, trying to find the right fit, and not really finding that. So that continued for quite a while. And as I looked for a full-time job, what I found was there was a glut of really, really qualified people on the market, and very few tech jobs at my level, in corporate communications. So it was really trying to find that needle at a haystack, not only finding the
mhm,
job and then going through the whole interview process, but then determining if it's the right fit. So I had
mhm,
a lot of, false starts, if you will, talked to a lot of companies, explored a lot of different opportunities, and never quite found that right fit. And so I was talking to a friend of mine who I went to high school with, who is a recruiter for tech sales. And he was asking me, Ian, what do you really want in the next phase of your career? And I said, you know what, Mike, I would love to not have to change jobs every few years. I would love to find a job that I can really settle into and spend several years and maybe even retire from that job. Wouldn't that be amazing? Uh, and so he said, Ian, if you want to do that, maybe you need to think about another industry besides tech.
mhm,
Because tech is so ever changing. Companies get acquired, they merge. I mean, a lot of things happen. Leadership changes. I'd
mhm,
say more than some other industries. And so after he said that, as I was looking at various LinkedIn listings, my current job opportunity popped up, and I thought, the timing was right from a number of standpoints. First of all, I gotten through the bulk of um, my career, putting my kids through school and things that I needed to do where I had to make extra money that I don't need to do anymore at this stage of my life. And so I began some conversations with the superintendent, and I had to go through a very long process. very extensive application, panel interviews, et cetera, et cetera. But, here I am, and, it's been incredibly fulfilling. And I feel like, hopefully this isn't a spoiler alert for any of your listeners, but, um, there's a storyline in Avengers, Endgame where, it involves the Incredible Hulk. And so, he's spent his entire, well, I could say a bulk of his adult life, with having these two sides to him. And then finally they kind of merge into this one character. And that's kind of how this role felt for me is, I get to give back to my community. At the same time, I get to use my skills to drive things forward. And, um, and that's been incredibly rewarding and
That's
for
awesome. Yeah, yeah, that I love the comparison to the Hulk and kind of bringing all of that together, and that's just so great that it actually worked out that way. And you had even mentioned to me, you know, regardless of maybe pay cut, it was worth it because of the not only the stability factor and, change of industry, but you were thinking about that the long game for you and getting more fulfillment in that last role. So, um, that's a really interesting story, and I'm just, again, happy that, you got to this point. So
yeah, can I add something to that as
oh,
well?
yeah.
So, one of the things that attracted to me to this opportunity is we're at an unprecedented time when it comes to public education in our country.
Mhm.
So, as you know, in Washington, there's discussion of dismantling the US Department of Education. The current administration is withholding funds
Yep.
that were allocated by the Department of Education to local communities. And I really wanted to be a part of solving the problem. This is a time when local education is more important than ever. And the County Office of Education, where I work, we play a critical role in coordinating with the districts and doing things on the county level more efficiently and economically than can be done on the district level. And so that bigger cause really attracted me to this current role.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, it's such a crucial time, and it's so needed. So, um, I thank you for working towards that because I find that extremely troubling, and it's key that we try to make a change there. Um, just kind of curious when you first got into the role and started getting more comfortable in this space, was there anything that surprised you about working in this sector, maybe in comparison to the tech industry, or anything that was refreshing? I would just like to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a bit of both. So I was, again, I had several interviews and discussions with people as I made the shift to this new role, and so I was going into it with my eyes open in terms of what the some of the challenges might be. Um, and I've certainly encountered some of those, particularly when it comes to, how should I put this? Um, in the corporate world, it's very easy to promote somebody, for example. In government, it's a very different process, and you have to open it up to the public. Anybody can apply. Then you have these panel interviews, and then the top 3 are recommended. It's not like you can just say, "Hey, Megan, you're doing a great job. We want to promote you. I'm going to have a conversation with my boss, and then we're going to make the case." And just that's a whole different process. And so, I've had to adjust to those types of processes. Um, I think it's like generally there's more, in my experience in the corporate world, you have a certain set of people who can make the decisions and you make decisions and then you move on. I'd say that it feels like there's more kind of consensus building that needs to take place in my current role, which is fine. I mean, I've had to build consensus and bring people along in my public sector service role.
Mhm.
So it's like I feel like I can apply that set of skills. I mean, I think for me, it's probably a little bit of an easier transition than it would be for somebody who had not served in public office.
Right.
Um, so it hasn't been hugely surprising, but you asked also in terms of like how it's different in terms of the benefits and the rewards, and I would say it's the first thing I noticed, or I should actually say my wife noticed this, is I'm not constantly checking email around the clock.
That's
It's like,
wonderful.
yeah, by the early evening, I mean, things really kind of die down, and then I really don't I don't hear from people until, first thing in the morning. And so that really is refreshing because I feel like I kind of get a little bit more of my life back.
Yes.
So it is, I would say, a better work life balance. And that's been
Well,
great.
that's huge. I mean, that means so much. You know, regardless of anything else, I think that's a huge piece. It would be for me. And I liked something you mentioned is it wasn't as big of a transition because you had had that previous experience. So maybe this is kind of going back to your roots in a way, and kind of refinding what your purpose was and what you really wanted to pursue. But as a mentor, you've been my mentor for years. What would you say to someone who is thinking about making a completely, you know, a completely big different change in their career, whether it's the space, the type of role, and especially in this market? What advice would you give to them when it comes to following their passions and what matters to them?
Yeah, I'd say think about like what are your transferable skills and how exactly would you apply them to the new industry that you're looking at? So I'll elaborate on my shift from the nonprofit world to the tech world. So I actually at my nonprofit was doing fundraising and development, but also getting publicity for the organization. And so that was the piece that I really hung my hat on and said, I know how to get publicity. I've done this for this local agency. Now let me come help do it for your agency's clients. And so you need to have something like that that you can, I'd say, hang your hat on and say, this is the transferable skill that is going to benefit you. So as I made this second transition or pivot, whatever you want to call it, um, the way I approached it was I knew I was not coming from a background in education, and I knew that my competitors were. And, in during my interview process, somebody said to me, "You don't come from a background in education. How would you learn this?" And I said, "Well, I've learned a lot of different things in a lot of different industries. I went from, information security to data centers to databases to, you name it. And in each case, those things have their own set of terminologies that you have to memorize and understand. I said,
Hmm.
I can do the same thing with education lingo. I can speak whatever language I need to be able to speak.
Right.
Um, and I said, if you want somebody who spent their whole career in education, clearly I'm not your person. But if you want somebody who has a unique blend of business, government, and nonprofit experience, who knows the community and can amplify your story in the community, then I'm your guy. And so I think you have to kind of understand like, what are your strengths and how do you play to those strengths and how do you market yourself? And so, in this case, it worked. They bought what I was selling and I'm happy they did.
Well, you are in communication, so I'm sure you sold it well. But yeah, it's about applying your skills to whatever position or scenario you're in. So I think that's a really smart answer, and it makes total sense why that would be applicable for them. Cool. And so you also were touching on kind of your core values, right? Of you're in this and it means something to you because you know change needs to happen. And that's something that you personally feel strongly about. So in your role now and in your work today, how are your values leading you? Are they leading you? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly thinking about how I'm helping people, particularly helping the kids and families of the county in which I live. Everything I'm doing, I'm thinking about like if we can communicate this program better, it's going to help teachers understand it better. It's going to help families understand it better. It's going to help kids understand it better. And if we can help them understand it, then they know how to take advantage of the program. They know how to work with us. Um, it'll also help attract partners and funders for, various grants, and so those are the kinds of things where, it starts with, who, what are we trying to do? Who are we trying to help? And then how can we do it?
Hmm. Makes complete sense, and you're carrying that out really, really well. So props to you, and that's really exciting work, it seems
Thank
like. Um, and just reflecting on the pivots you've made, has your definition of success changed as well? And in terms of like, what are you getting out of this experience? What are you gaining professionally, maybe emotionally? Do you view your success differently now?
I don't know that I've ever really had a clear definition of success. I mean, I've always wanted to have a comfortable life and not have to worry about money. But success, I don't think I've ever really defined success as money. I've never wanted to be rich. Like I said, I've never wanted to worry about money, and so that's like success is I don't have to worry about it.
It's kind of
Uh,
like freedom, right?
yeah, yeah, and, the other aspect of success is, that feeling of being fulfilled. Like, I want to feel like I have a purpose, like I'm making a difference, like there's a reason why I'm here, and so I've always sought that out, and if there were times in my life where I felt like I didn't have a purpose, then I actively sought that out, like, "What am I doing here?" It's not just trying
Mhm.
to help some company increase their shareholder value. It's like I have to be helping people.
And did you always have that sense of what your purpose was or what you wanted to do? Because I feel like a lot of people maybe are stuck and don't even know what their purpose is. So do you have any advice for someone in that situation?
I don't know that I would say I always have known my purpose. Um, when I was a kid, I mean, I had like different things I wanted to do as a career. And then at some point, I got in my head that, if I went into politics, I could be able to help a lot of people and maybe even have a whole career in politics and see how far that would go. Um, so Uh, I would say there's kind of like just this, thread of like wanting to help people since I was a little kid. Um, I would say that I've always had a soft spot for people who are struggling and in pain and need help. Um, and I've, just wanted to do what I can. So, I've done a lot of volunteer work. I still serve on nonprofit boards. I donate to worthy causes. And that's just something I've always done.
Yeah, well, that's just you're a good person. So that's really great. And
I
not only
try.
that, but but it feels authentic to who you are, right? You've had a sense of that's kind of what I meant is you've always kind of authentically known what you care about, right? So to follow up, what advice would you give someone to remain as authentic as possible to what matters to them and pursue something within that realm?
I'd say it's good to ask yourself tough questions, like what am I doing with my life and my career? And do I feel fulfilled? And is there something else I could and should be doing? What are my strengths and how do I build on those strengths? I'm a big believer in, and I think you've heard me say this before, in playing people to their strengths. So just like in managing a team, someone's really good at shortstop, you play them at shortstop. You don't put them out in, left field.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I think that that's what people need to do is they need to like look inward and go like, what am I really good at? And like, how
Mhm.
do I build on that? And then how do I market that? And, and what do I want to do? Market it to whom for what end and what am I gonna feel good and authentic and valued at the end of wherever that journey leads?
Yeah, I agree that that's a really important starting point of looking inward and saying, what are my strengths? What am I honestly a natural at? What do I love? What can I thrive in?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I like to try to focus on with people in my work and own person as step one of let's define and understand your brand identity first and foremost. I call it brand identity, but it's
Mhm.
really you as a person,
Yeah.
right? Who you are, what do you care about? What are your goals and values? And then from there, that uncovers a successful personal brand.
Yeah.
Um, and
I think
you've done years of branding yourself. So I would love to hear your thoughts on what makes for a successful personal brand.
Yeah, it's funny, I think a lot of people don't understand what a personal brand is,
Mm,
and they think, "Oh, hey, I've gotta go and, like, post all these photos of myself on LinkedIn or Instagram, and that's gonna, like, make my brand." It's like, no, you need to know who you are first,
mhm.
and what you stand for. Um, I think those are really important things, and so, like, I've never been somebody who has marketed myself really, like, I don't put a lot of stuff out there on social media. I'm not deliberately thinking, "Okay, this is building my brand." I'll say that, like, I did learn from running for office that, when I was talking to people and I was hearing, like what they thought of me and what I was kind of like how I was coming across to people, that was like it was kind of like looking in a mirror. And one of the things that became clear to me that was distinct from other candidates is people saw me as being this champion for the average citizen. And
Mhm.
so I embraced that, and I started putting that on my materials,
Yeah.
uh, a champion for the average citizen. And,
Nice.
I my slogan in the last election was putting community first,
I love
and
that.
that really resonated with people. They're like, "Yeah, I get it. That's what I want in office. I don't want someone who's putting, corporations first or putting developers first. I want someone who's putting our community first." And, it's sort of one of those things where like you test out a couple things like running for office politics doesn't come naturally to me at least. And so like I told you, I didn't win my first few times I ran. And I learned from that, it also, I think I learned that I was trying to be what I thought the voters wanted. And
Mhm.
when I said, screw that, I'm going to be myself and what I believe in, I'm going to speak my mind, that really resonated, and I think you see that
Preach.
with some political candidates today. I mean, the candidates who are seen as inauthentic, they don't win. Like, they may be
Yeah.
saying all the right things, but they don't win because people can see right through that. They go like, "Oh,
100%.
this person here, I may not agree with everything he says, but he's authentic. I believe that he believes what he's saying," and
I
so,
believe he believes what he's saying. I love
yeah,
that.
but you see that, and it's interesting. I mean, I don't want to talk about any particular candidates, but I know people who like completely disagree with a political candidate, but they like that that candidate is authentic. And
Mm.
I think, the same thing applies to careers, any career, is like, when you're going through interviews, and you're answering questions, it's like interviewers are kind of like instinctively picking up on that. It's like, is this person just telling me what they think I want to hear? Or are they
Yes.
telling me what they actually believe? Um,
And candidly, I've been in that situation where, it's hectic out there interviewing and it's stressful and trying and you get to the point where you are practicing and trying to deliver what you think will land. But you're right. And I've noticed a difference. Now I'm just telling my story from my heart, being myself, sharing what I truly do know, and having the confidence to remind myself that this is I know what I'm saying. I know who I am, and I know what I want to share.
yeah,
I don't have to rehearse it as much.
exactly.
So I've seen the difference in interviews, even with I mean, I experiment with my own personal social media here and there. Sometimes I get more of a response than other times. Um, but that's what I do with my clients as well of let's be as real as possible because that's what really resonates when you're telling a true story that comes from you. It's not just, AI jargon. It's not trying to position yourself in a light that isn't actually, like you said, your true strengths and your true gifts. Um, so it does take some guidance sometimes though to actually get to that point where you're comfortable and you're in that zone and you can just let yourself thrive from that point on, and I think
Yeah.
that's when things catch on.
It takes a while to, find your confidence. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I've said this several times. It's like knowing your strengths and what you're good at. And I'll, you may not like this analogy, but I think it's a lot like dating. And
No, it
it's like
is.
you want somebody who is themselves, and you like naturally gravitate towards people who like, okay, this is I'm seeing the real person here.
It's good energy.
It's not that not that you're telling the person you're dating everything about yourself on the first date, but, when you know who you are, you're confident, you're comfortable, and you're not trying to be someone else in order to impress the other person, that goes a long way. And, the
Mhm.
interviewing is a lot like that.
100%.
I mean, I gave the experience of my, this job here. It's like I knew what I had to offer, and I knew that it had value, and I was
And you're
not trying
confident.
it was. I was because I know I'm good at what I do, and
Mhm.
so it's like you have to have that confidence. You have to, and if you don't have that confidence, then you need to build that confidence either through classes or consulting with somebody who can help. Um, But, and that's, like you mentioned, mentorships. I mean, it's like everyone should have a mentor, whether they know you're their mentor or not. Uh, you need to like have people that you can look up to and learn from. That's really important.
Yeah, and as I've emerged into this leadership coach and brand consultant in my work, I like to think of myself as a mentor too to my clients of they can just I'm kind of a sounding board and I like to have that trustworthy relationship that we've built where they can just open up to me in a way and I can translate that in a way that reflects that relationship and reflects the understanding. And that's when great content comes. And
Yeah.
that's when we continue working together. So
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed that piece of it.
And I will say that I've always found you to be very authentic. That
Thank
was
you. That means
that
a
was
lot.
something no, that was something that I really appreciated about you right from the beginning. I'm like, "Okay, this is Megan, it knows who she is and what she has to offer." And I respect that a lot.
That is a great compliment. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
Cool. Well, any final thoughts? I've really enjoyed this conversation. And again, I'm just so happy that you've gotten to this. It feels like a full circle moment for you. But any final thoughts when it comes to um, really creating the career and the fulfillment that you feel like you deserve?
Um, don't sell yourself short. Like,
Hmm.
I think a lot of people, they don't really, I know it's not we live in a culture where, it's generally not accepted to brag. Um, there's certain, very obvious exceptions to that where people, can go quite a long way talking about themselves. But, I'd say, just, know instinctively like what you're good at and what your value is and what you could bring to any organization. And when you're talking about it, don't talk about it as, hey, I'm really good at this and this. Say, this is what I can bring to you. This is how I can help
Right.
your organization. So it's like knowing your audience and really like applying what you're good at to what the organization needs and drawing that really clear line, I think will go a long way.
And yes, I totally agree. And I think a lot of people, especially people in leadership, they're trying to make an impact, right? So it's not only about what I'm good at, what I can excel in, how can
Exactly.
I make an impact? And that
Exactly.
especially can be applied to a job or, I even thought about this earlier today of, I don't want to, you know, be tooting my own horn or talking about myself too much, especially online. But when it's shared in a way that you feel like you're saying something important that needs to be said and showing that part of you, it's worth saying. So I think there is often people get uncomfortable sometimes because there's that fine line of being humble and, like you said, don't not selling yourself short. So I
Yeah.
think that's really important to remember.
I really love that word impact. And I sort of like, as you were saying that, I had sort of like a formula in my head, which is your needs plus my value equals impact.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's like, understand what the organization or the person that you're working with, what they need, and then apply your value to that. And then talk about like, what is the outcome? It's like, if I were to work for your organization, here's the impact you could expect, and that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about the another thing related to that as well of yes, it's how can I help the organization, but what are you getting out of it? How will that fulfill your values and your
Yeah,
wants and needs? So that's also something to consider when it comes to impact. How will you impact and how will this impact your trajectory?
that's another great, analogy to, like, dating is, like, it's a two-way street, like, each
Yes.
party has to get something out of it, and if it's
Mhm.
mutually beneficial, it works.
Yes. Well, we always are striving for that win-win situation. So totally agree. And again, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. But yeah, until next time. Thank you.
You're
All right,
welcome.
I'm going to press stop.